My veil caught on a chair as I spun around, the torn lace floating to the ground like a broken promise. In the empty wedding hall, the silence was deafening. No whispers, no shuffling feet, no stifled coughs of relatives pretending not to cry. Just vacant white chairs in perfect rows, mocking me with their emptiness. My thumb brushed over my phone screen where the family group chat showed everyone running late, with the same timestamp as my brother's business launch invitation. My name is Olivia. I'm 32 and a freelance designer. This is the story of how I turned an empty wedding into the fullest version of myself. The event coordinator hovered nearby, her clipboard clutched to her chest like armor. "Should we wait a little longer?" she whispered, eyes darting to the double doors as if willing guests to materialize. The raw truth burned in my chest. They had chosen not to come, every single one of them. "We've already waited 45 minutes, I said, my voice steadier than the trembling in my hands. "They're not coming." My maid of honor, Rachel, squeezed my arm. "They're missing out. You look incredible." But this wasn't about looking good in photos. My parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles, even relatives I barely knew but who'd enthusiastically RSVP'd, were all at my brother's flashy business launch. The same event my father had promoted for months, like it was the second coming. I'd scheduled my wedding date months before Noah announced his grand opening, but not a single family member had even pretended to try splitting their time. "You'll understand," Mom had said last week, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's important for him." The officiant cleared his throat. "We can still proceed if—" "No," I cut him off, the words slicing through the awkward stillness. "We're not doing this, not when it's supposed to be the happiest day of my life." Rachel shot me a worried look. "You're calling it off?" "No," I whispered, tears burning behind my eyes. "I'm just not letting them take this from me." I reached for my phone, intending to shove it into my clutch and walk out, when the screen lit up with a message from Daniel, my husband-to-be. "Smile." Confused, I glanced around, but he wasn't in sight. Then notifications flooded in. 63 missed calls from Mom, Dad, Uncle William, Aunt Catherine, and even Noah. The same people who couldn't bother to show up. Rachel's eyes widened. "What the hell?" I opened the first voicemail, my breath catching as my father's panicked voice filled the silence. "Olivia, call us back right now. You need to explain what's going on." Before I could process his words, Daniel appeared in the doorway, not in his tuxedo, but in a perfectly tailored gray suit, his jaw tight, eyes cold. He gave me a small, knowing smile that revealed he'd already set something in motion. "Ready?" he asked. I stared at him, torn between dread and a strange relief. "Ready for what?" "For the part where they realize," he said, stepping closer, "that they just made the biggest mistake of their lives." Daniel didn't waste a second. He took my bouquet, set it aside, and guided me out of the empty hall without looking back. Outside, the valet brought our car around. The city air felt unexpectedly cold against my skin. My phone vibrated continuously. Mom, Dad, Noah, all calling like their lives depended on it. "What's going on?" I asked, as Daniel drove away from the venue. The just married sign we'd never attach now a ghost in my mind. He smiled faintly. "Your family's launch party isn't going as planned. The bank froze their transactions." My head snapped toward him. "What? Why?" "Remember that loan you co-signed for Noah years ago? Turns out your name is still tied to his company's assets. I just asked the bank to clarify your consent. That triggered a hold until things are cleared up." I blinked, processing. "You did this today?" "They chose today," he said simply, "and now they're realizing you matter more than they thought." Another call lit up my phone. Daniel nodded toward it. "Answer on speaker." I picked up. Dad's voice came through sharp and strained. "Olivia, fix this. Your brother's investors are here, and the bank is holding everything." Noah's voice cut in, furious. "If this is about your wedding, grow up. We'll take you out to dinner later." Something steeled inside me. You skipped my wedding. Now you can come see me, 7 p.m. Grayson House. Apologize first, then we'll talk about fixing your mess. Silence. Then Dad's clipped, reluctant. Fine. Daniel's hand found mine as I ended the call. Good. You're finally setting the rules. By the time we pulled up to Grayson House, the sun had dipped low, staining the glass buildings in pale orange. Daniel had chosen the venue strategically, neutral, upscale, and very public. The kind of place where tempers stayed in check because too many important people might be watching. Inside, we secured a private glass-walled conference room. The long table gleamed under pendant lights, and our footsteps echoed on the polished floor. Daniel wrote 7 p.m. on the corner of the whiteboard, underlining it once. Punctuality matters tonight. At 6:55, Rachel arrived, eyes blazing with loyalty. If they try anything, I'm staying. No one corners you alone. I texted her our location as we drove to Grayson House, knowing I'd need her support. At 7:10, the glass door finally slid open. My parents entered first, Dad in an overly formal suit, Mom clutching her purse like a shield. Noah followed, jaw tight, phone in hand. Behind him trailed an older man with a businesslike air, his CFO. No one sat. Let's make this quick, Dad said, impatience already threading his voice. I didn't move from my spot at the head of the table. Before we discuss anything, I want something clear. You'll apologize for missing my wedding, not because it's polite, but because it's the truth. Mom shifted uncomfortably. Olivia, we didn't miss it. We dash. You didn't come, I cut in, my tone even but landing like a stone. Dad's jaw flexed. He glanced at Noah, then at Daniel, then back at me. Fine, I'm sorry. Mom gave a quick nod. Yes, we're sorry. Noah didn't speak. His silence said everything. Good, I said. Now business. Daniel slid a folder across the table. Here's the original loan guarantee Olivia signed, the bank's freeze notice, and our email request for clarification. The CFO flipped through the documents, frowning. If we settle the old obligation and provide proof to the bank, the hold will lift tomorrow. Correct, Daniel said, but there are 3 additional conditions. Noah's head snapped up. Conditions? Yes, I said, looking directly at him. 1, you sign a statement acknowledging my name was added under pressure and you will never use my finances without my consent again. 2, you reimburse every out-of-pocket cost I've covered for your ventures. 3, you send me a written apology that mentions my wedding. It stays private, but I want it. Noah scoffed. This is blackmail. This is boundaries, Daniel said calmly, something your family has never respected. Dad started to argue, but the CFO cleared his throat. Noah, she has legal grounds, and the longer this goes on, the worse it looks to investors. Noah's glare could have cut glass, but he finally said, Fine, we'll do it. I didn't smile. I simply leaned back in my chair, feeling for the first time in years like I wasn't the one being cornered. The agreement was signed before they left Grayson House. Daniel ensured there were 2 witnesses, Rachel and the CFO, so there was no chance of them later claiming it never happened. Noah signed last, his pen jabbing the paper like each stroke was punishment. As soon as they were gone, Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. That's step 1. Step 1? I raised an eyebrow. You'll see. The next morning, calls started again. Only this time, they weren't just from family. My phone buzzed with numbers I didn't recognize. Journalists from local business pages, people wanting a statement about what happened at the launch. I ignored most of them, but curiosity got the better of me when Rachel texted, "Turn on Channel 6. I remembered she had been following the story closely since our meeting at Grayson House the night before. The segment was already halfway through when I flipped on the TV. A reporter stood outside my brother's gleaming new storefront, her hair whipping in the wind, talking over footage from the night before. Sources say a financial hold disrupted transactions during the grand opening, leaving customers unable to complete purchases. Several investors left early, and some vendors have expressed frustration over the delay. The camera cut to footage of Noah looking red-faced, gesturing at a small group of investors with his hands in the air. Behind him, employees awkwardly handed out free coffee, trying to keep people from leaving. The caption read, "Launch Day Freeze Sparks Questions." Daniel came up behind me, coffee in hand, and smirked at the screen. They'll spin it as a technical glitch, but the investors aren't stupid. They'll want answers, and the bank paperwork will show exactly why it happened. "And my name will be right there," I murmured. Not as the villain, but as the guarantor they overlooked, the one they treated like she didn't matter. It hit me then. Not just that they had ignored me on my wedding day, but that they'd erased me for years, even when my signature had literally kept them afloat. Before I could respond, my phone lit up again. Noah. I let it go to voicemail, but a text followed instantly. "We need to talk now." Daniel glanced at it. "They'll want to smooth things over." Translation: they'll want you to help clean up their image without taking any of the credit. He was right. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to give them what they wanted. By noon, social media had picked up the story. People commented on how odd it was that none of my family had been at my wedding, thanks to guests who'd posted photos of the empty venue and tagged me. Several of Daniel's friends who had attended the wedding had shared the images, making sure to point out the unusual absence of any family members. The posts weren't viral yet, but the narrative was forming, and it wasn't flattering for them. That evening, my parents showed up at our apartment unannounced. Daniel answered the door but didn't invite them in. "Olivia," my mother started, her tone a carefully measured blend of concern and accusation. "We need to get ahead of this. People are talking." "Let them," I said, crossing my arms. "Everything they're saying is true." Dad's jaw tightened. "This isn't good for the family name." "Then maybe the family should have shown up for mine," I said sharply. "You made your priorities clear. Now so have I." Noah stepped forward, looking more worn down than I'd ever seen him. "Olivia, please. Investors are pulling back. If you talk to them, reassure them." I cut him off. "You want me to fix this? Then admit publicly that I was there for you when you needed me, and you couldn't even show up when I needed you. Otherwise, you can clean up your own mess." The silence stretched. Daniel stood beside me, his presence solid and unshakable. Finally, Noah muttered something under his breath and turned to leave, my parents following reluctantly. When the door closed, Daniel smiled faintly. "Step 2. Complete." I frowned. "And step 3? That's the part where they realize you're not just the person they underestimated, you're the one they can't ignore anymore." 2 weeks later, my family's polished facade had cracks deep enough for the whole city to see. It started with a quiet article in the local business journal, buried on page 6, "Launch Day Freeze Traced to Overlooked Guarantor." It was factual, almost dry, just explaining that my name had been on key loan documents, that the freeze had been standard banking procedure, and that it was resolved the next day. But then it grew legs. The article was picked up by a popular regional news blog that thrived on human interest twists. They added a headline that made people click, "The Sister They Forgot, How a Wedding Snub Exposed a Launch Day Disaster." That was when messages started pouring in. Old college friends I hadn't heard from in years, former co-workers, even distant relatives who'd never invited me anywhere, suddenly remembered I existed. Half offered support, the other half wanted the inside scoop. I ignored all of them. Instead, I focused on building something that had nothing to do with my family. Daniel and I had been talking about it for months, turning my freelance design work into a full studio. Now, with all this attention, it felt like the perfect time. We rented a corner office in a shared workspace, painted it the softest shade of cream, and put my name, Olivia Gray Design, on the door. Rachel helped design the logo. Daniel handled the legal filings. I worked late into the night, not because I had to, but because it felt like mine. And then came the gala. Every year, the city's Chamber of Commerce hosted a black tie fundraiser for local entrepreneurs. Noah had been invited to showcase his launch. I hadn't planned to go, but when an invitation arrived addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Gray, I knew exactly who had pulled the strings. Daniel had contacted the chamber directly, mentioning how my design work was gaining traction and securing us an invitation through his business connections. "You're thinking of going," Daniel said one night, watching me twirl the heavy cardstock in my hands. "I'm thinking of showing them," I said, "but not in the way they expect." On the night of the gala, I wore a sleek midnight blue gown that caught the light like water. Daniel looked devastating in a black tux. As we walked in, I felt eyes turning, whispers starting. My parents were already there, Noah at their side, all wearing expressions so tight they could shatter. They didn't approach us. Not yet. The event moved quickly. Speeches, awards, polite applause. Then came the networking. That's when it happened. A group of investors I vaguely recognized from Noah's launch approached me, not him. I realized they must have been among those who'd seen the news coverage and made the connection to my name on the bank documents. "You're Olivia Gray," one said warmly. "We've been hearing a lot about you lately." Noah stood only a few feet away, watching, his jaw set. "Yes," I said, smiling. "I run Olivia Gray Design. We specialize in branding and digital strategy." They peppered me with questions, asked for my card, and nodded approvingly when I described recent projects. It was subtle, but the shift was there. My name carried weight now, separate from his. Finally, my parents came over. My mother's smile was brittle. "Olivia, darling, you look lovely." "Thank you," I said, tone neutral. Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to say we're proud of what you're doing." It sounded rehearsed, like a line they'd agreed on before approaching. "I appreciate that," I replied, "but I'm not doing any of it for your approval." Noah stepped forward. "Olivia?" His voice was quieter now, almost careful. "I know we screwed up, I can't change that, but maybe we could work together. Your design work could—" "No," I said, cutting him off gently but firmly. "You had years to see me. You didn't. And now I'm not interested in being an accessory to your success story." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Daniel slipped his hand into mine, and we walked away, leaving them standing in the middle of the glittering room, surrounded by people who had just witnessed the power shift. That night, as we drove home, I looked out at the city lights and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: lightness, freedom from burden. "They'll keep calling," Daniel said. "I know," I said, smiling faintly. "But now they're calling me, and I get to decide if I answer." And for once, I didn't feel like I owed them anything. Daniel and I went on to formalize our marriage in a small private ceremony a month later, with just Rachel and a few close friends present. It was everything I needed it to be: genuine, intimate, and completely on our terms. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.